Hello everybody and welcome back to our channel. Today we'll be reviewing the Plan 01 kitchen composition. It's so filled with details and it can be seen as a showcase of the interior design and customization potential of the Plan collection. Let's dive in. Let's start from the dimensions of this very composition, which is 421 on this side, 336 on this side, from the boiserie panel till the end of the peninsula, and it's 258, the peninsula itself, with this rounded upper table, eye table, which is 125 in diameter. The height of this composition is 220 for these columns and goes up to 267 for the hanging cabinets. Bear in mind that these dimensions that I've shared with you are barely just an idea of what you can do, because the whole composition is customizable by the millimeter. So every dimension that we can share today is just an example. The materials as well are very much customizable. Here we see the Plan 01 composition with a matte lacquer finish. This is the color Dove Gray, Tortora, okay? Then we have quite a few parts in this composition with a laminate, which is called the Natural Walnut. This is a perfect example of a beautiful laminate. So it's not real wood, but it's a high-end laminate, which when you touch it, when you look at it, you don't perceive straight away that is not wood. Here we see again the Dove Gray matte lacquer, and we see the grips, which are lacquered, in this case with the color Moka Shine, but of course you can choose the color of the grip. All the tops and the side here have been created with a laminum ceramic. The finish is called Michelangelo Calacatta, with the soft touch finish, which you know, it's not fully matte, it's not shiny, and the expression soft touch is indeed effective in conveying the perception that you get when you touch it. Actually, it's not as cold as you would normally perceive ceramics, and it's really nice to the touch, and it keeps all the interesting features of ceramics, which are very practical in use. We move on to the eye table, which has been veneered with real walnut, and here you see a perfect example about how real walnut can be very similar, or at least high-end laminate can be very similar to real walnut in terms of perception, both in touch and both in looks. So we said that this is a peninsula, 257 by 105, but the way it has been built here could be perceived as an island, as a kitchen island, because it has, for example, ceramic slabs on both sides. Here we see, because this is a showroom situation, but something like this could happen in a real home. And here we have the peninsula, which is partially beside the wall and partially comes out from the wall. And so here we have this panel, which goes down to the floor. Then we move on, and now we comment all the different elements that we have in the composition. Very interesting, we have these big doors, which are 75 centimeters wide. Here we have a giant drawer unit. This is astounding, and it's actually quite interesting how it has been set up inside, both in terms of accessories, okay, for dishes and plates and all the accessories that you need in your kitchen. But what is interesting, we can see it on every drawer of this unit, is the richness, I could say the luxury of how the drawers have been built, because we have this metal structure with a beautiful dark laminate bottom, and this metal structure, so this acts as a grip. And then we have the same walnut laminate on the sides of the drawers, which give a nice touch indeed. So 75 centimeters doors are not only nice to look at because they are very clean from the outside in terms of looks, less vertical lines, but also very practical because you have a big space. Here we have an open unit, okay? You can see the structure, and especially on these sort of elements, I can perceive how beautiful is this laminate, because not only the surface, but the edges as well are very much realistic. Also we see how it has been built properly with this underlying panel which support the ceramics. Then we have the, well, this is a basic door. We can see here it has a reduced depth. It has a reduced depth because of the unit that we'll see on the other side. Okay. The eye table, well, it sits comfortably 3 people, I would say, possibly 4. Of course, this would not be your only table in the room. It's more for an informal lunch, dinner, or for breakfast. The supporting metal leg is with the same Moka Shine finish of the grips that we have shown before, and the same finish, lacquered, is the surface underneath. I like the fact that the perimeter has this very tilted angle, and so you perceive it as being very thin on the perimeter, but you don't perceive the thickness of the panel unless you move a few meters away. Here we are on the other side of the peninsula. We see the other ceramic panel which goes down to the floor. And here we have another 75 centimeters unit, which is peculiarly built because we have an additional working top element which you can pull out. And I have this panel which it is made with this black HPL surface, which is also very practical. Underneath it we have another sliding element. This is quite interesting because one could say, well, but if it doesn't have a front, then I do perceive what's inside it, so I don't like it in terms of aesthetics. Well, it could be an objection, but for example, I could have certain smaller appliances placed on this sliding tray, and underneath it we have another drawer. In this case, it could have been a push-pull, but it is more practical from the underneath. Okay, I cannot have another grip here, and so there's a grip underneath. Of course, the grip underneath is not as practical as the grip above because I need to lean down more. But yes, this is a multifunctional element with this working tray for appliances, and additional storage underneath. Then we move on to the element for the hob. What I'd like to point out here is the fact that when you use such a base in conjunction with a specific hob with the built-in hood, we must consider that this top of appliance actually takes up much space in the upper drawer, and you need to consider it because, for example, if I have all my stuff inside here, I must consider that I cannot go over a certain limit and I cannot use all the available space. We move on to the corner element. Here we see what is called the fake corner element. I know that the word fake doesn't sound good, but normally when you have the corner element, you have a door which opens up like this, and then you can access the corner. In this case, in this composition, sometimes it happens also in real homes. We chose to use the fake corner, which is this 4x4 or 5x5 element, which is meant so that this drawer doesn't scratch against this side or the other way around. And we must also consider that the space underneath this part, this section here, is empty, hollow underneath the top, because also we have on the other side the big base that I showed at the start. Here we have a nice progression of these 75 centimeters elements. This is a specific situation where we have a 60 centimeters dishwasher. This is a big version with much storage capacity, and in order to have this 75 centimeters succession of doors instead of the 60, which is the standard, here we have 15 centimeters, which can be used, for example, for all the products that you use to wash the dishes or to support the operations of the dishwasher itself. Also, it has a very clean design because, you know, here also, well, I'm using the word fake too much, because here we also have a fake grip. You know, this grip doesn't have a real purpose. Well, the point is actually keeping this line, keep making it a continuum. Because, you know, I could have a full door here, it's totally easy, very easy to manufacture, but then I would kind of break the beauty of these lines. We move on to the sink unit, okay? I see the sink itself. In this case, the sink has been built with the same ceramic of the top. Here, it's the right situation to perceive the depth of these base units, because this is 75 centimeters, and it's not only beautiful to look at, but also quite practical, because I have space, I have actual space behind, for example, the tap, and I have a deeper working area where I'm supposed to cook. Okay, and we get to the last element here, and it's a standard, I would say, with a different standard base unit, drawer unit, with a different sort of grill. In this case, it's a wooden accessory, and here it is. And we look at the lower back. Well, with all the boxes of the showroom. Okay, here we see how this beautiful boiserie has been built. It is with the same laminate, natural walnut laminate finish we described before. And we see how the boiserie is left on the hanging cabinets, but also goes below them, okay? Below the boiserie itself, we have a backsplash panel made with the same ceramic of the top. And if we look at the side here, we see how the boiserie itself is built, because it's 5 centimeters thick totally, and there is a supporting panel on top of which the boiserie is attached. And here, this is not something you would normally see in a home, because you would normally stick to this sort of detail, but we see how the LED lighting is built onto the panel, and we see how these metal shelves, which are very thin and with the same Moka Shine finish that we described before for the grips, they actually get into the boiserie through the different panels. And I show you an interesting detail, because not only we have lighting on the sides and above, but we also have lighting underneath. This thin, it's probably 1 centimeter, black metal bar is actually an additional lighting, okay, which I can turn on and off depending on my taste, and it creates a very nice effect. Today I'm feeling poetic, and so I'm using all these sort of expressions, like a succession of proportions with the 75 centimeters, and we see the same proportions here, because we have the 75 centimeters doors for the hanging cabinets, 2 of them, which actually cover a 60 centimeters cabinet. So the fact, well, this is a very high cabinet which goes up to the ceiling, it's customizable by the millimeter, and in fact here we see 3 shelves with a total of 4 spaces. Okay, here we have our natural metal grip, all the finishes of the laminate shelf, the metal finishes of the laminate shelves, and these very big doors kind of covers this open unit element. I can perceive the open unit element if I open both doors. I can see it's 45 centimeters. It's beautiful with its own frame, with LED lighting built in, and the point of these doors, which are wider than their cabinets, is the fact that of course it's very comfortable, very convenient, practical to open, because I can take it from here or from the grip underneath, but also I perceive much light inside the open unit, but I don't see the LED lighting, which might kind of flash my eyes. And another aspect I'd like to point out is that, just like in music, breaks and pauses give the sense to the notes we are playing. Also in interior design, when we have empty spaces here on the side, or also the boiserie here, they give a meaning to the object. Also in interior design, if I fill too much a space, I can perceive less of the furniture item I'm placing in my room. And this is an example. Open space here, and wood surrounding these lacquered cabinets, and the wood around it, the wood in the middle, give a sense to the overall composition. A brief comment about the boiserie here. In terms of dimensions, you know, here in the showroom we chose not to move towards the ceiling, because we wanted to have a very high left side up to the ceiling, and a relatively low, with 220 centimeters, right side, but of course it is customizable in every aspect. We move onto the columns. We see here we have a partition to close the composition and have it lacquered just like the fronts. We have another 75 centimeters door. This is a refrain of this review. And behind this door, we have the fridge. This is a standard fridge with the small refrigerator. Of course, you can customize this sort of fridge. You could have a double fridge and refrigerator. You can do whatever you want. And I'd like to point out about this column that we don't perceive a plinth. So you see that the doors here, they arrive very much near to the floor. And while on all kitchens, most kitchens, also this one, it's absolutely normal to have a plinth. The purpose of the plinth is multifaceted, because you have a decorative function, but also the purpose of the plinth is to cover the feet that support the bases, and its purpose is also to be easy to remove it and clean it underneath. In this situation, I don't have a plinth, and so what's the difference? The difference is that, for example, I need to be slightly more careful because I could dent it when touching it with my feet or with the hoover when I'm cleaning the floor. So slightly less practical, but also beautiful to look at, because this side does not look like a kitchen. So here we have the same situation which I described in the hanging cabinets, so I won't babble on much about it. Oops, was a surprise for later, but we'll get to it. So here we have the same effect with the open elements, okay? And very nice bookshelves. And here we are at the surprise, because this is a special column. This is a special column with, let's say, special ways of accessing the column. This is the way it opens, okay? And then I have this smaller door which open on the other way, on the other side. So what's the point of all this? Well, the point is actually hiding certain appliances which I don't want to show. It might be an open space I'm really careful with the looks of my kitchen. I don't want my kitchen to look as a kitchen. For some, could be absurd as a concept, but it's an important point for a clean design. And for example, here I can have much storage, and this storage is easily accessible indeed, because you know, when I'm using the kitchen, when I'm cooking, I leave this door open and I close it only when I'm done with cooking and I'm done with the cleaning of the kitchen. But while I'm cooking, I do in and out, in and out. I have much of my pantry directly accessible with all my products. And inside it, I can have, for example, an oven, like in this situation, or I could have a washing machine, because some do have the need to place a washing machine inside the kitchen, but they don't want to look at it, because they might consider to ruin the clean design they're striving for. Here we see an F oven, very high-end product, with a special door, which is especially practical in this sort of situation, because I can open the door and have it slide underneath the oven itself. And this sort of situation, I can work very easily without any hindrance by the space that the door could take. So, to close about the topic of this special column, it has lighting with a sensor which activates the light when I open the door. And this is not the door, because behind here we have the pantry that I just showed to you and the oven itself. And here, again, we have the same partition that we had at the beginning, so that here it is beside the column, but it could be open onto the living room and have a perfect appearance. So we've come to the end of today's product review about the Plan 01 kitchen composition. It has been a long journey, but I liked getting enthusiastic about certain stories, certain features, and certain things to take care when you design your kitchen. I hope that you like it, and see you next time.